Welcome to Men, Menopause, and Miracles, the podcast where midlife women explore strength in all its forms: physical, emotional, energetic, and deeply personal. This is a space for conversations about becoming, about the subtle ways we rebuild ourselves, and about redefining what it means to feel powerful and safe in your body and in the spaces you inhabit. Here we talk about men, hormones, muscle, nourishment, beauty, and the shifts that happen when the rules you followed no longer work. It is also where we explore how our environments shape us, the rooms we live in, the energy we surround ourselves with, and the ways our nervous system responds when a space feels calm, supportive, and aligned with who we are becoming. I'm Suzanne, your host and your midlife wingwoman, here to walk alongside you as you navigate the changes of midlife, reconnect with your body, and beginning to design a life that supports your nervous system, not overwhelms it. This is a podcast and a place for women who are ready to listen more closely to themselves, create the environments that feel like an excel instead of an effort, and step into this season with clarity, strength, and intention. This is episode 42, Designing Safety, Nervous Systems, and Spaces. My guest today is Elizabeth Armstead. Elizabeth is both a transformational coach and a feng shui consultant. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And what does that mean? Well, we're going to find out today. In short, she helps clients with how their inner world shapes their outer world and vice versa. Elizabeth's work lives at the intersection of psychology, environment, and energy. Let's dig in. I can't even talk today. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I am so glad you're here as well. Thank you for your time to be here with listeners and just dive into some things that are probably new for some and newer for others. So our listeners can get to know you better. Tell us a little bit about personally where you are on the midlife meter.
Yeah, we were talking about that before we hit record, and just the word midlife is such a fascinating way to like check in, like where am I on that meter and the yeah, and sometimes the unknowns of life. But I recently turned 40 and I also just lost my father, and I feel like that was a lot of, if midlife is starting to mid, if you will, feeling a lot of big life at once, and dealing with your parents getting older and seeing them transition and go in fully to spirit and no longer here on earth has been, yeah, I feel like how I most resonate or connect with life being a little bit different, not a little bit, a lot of bit different than maybe it was in my 30s and 20s.
Yeah, that's a significant marker, and thank you so much for sharing that. I definitely have friends who have lost parents, coming into midlife. I myself personally have not gone through that experience, but I'm sure many of our listeners, like my friends and circle as well, have experienced that. And I love your personal journey about having a corporate career or a career setting and then coming to a realization that it wasn't in alignment with either who you were or who you were becoming. So, when did this transition for you or transformation start to take place or peek its head?
Yeah. I think we can always feel when we're out of alignment. And a lot of times it's so uncomfortable because we can't quite wrap our head around what are we going to do about this not working, right? So, I feel I was in management consulting before, and I had a very interesting journey of starting within the Department of Defense as a consultant with a secret clearance. I'm originally from Virginia, and DC was a natural place after college for me to land. And being in the government, and I think seeing so much, it didn't always feel aligned, especially as a young blonde in the Department of Defense that didn't have their hair in a bun and was a contractor, right? Which was sometimes like a second class citizen, it felt at times. But yeah, I think that's really where I started developing I don't know if I was ever a good management consultant, but I was able to be psychic in a way, like very tuned in to the energy of the room and also what people were thinking and feeling without saying, and just noticing all the subtleties that happened within conversations, within interactions, even within like people walking in hallways. And so I've always been a highly sensitive person, and I think my experiences in consulting and then I moved through different departments of the government, got out of Department of Defense. I was like, oh, it'll get better. I'll be more aligned when I just have a different client. And then that wasn't the case. It would continue to show itself of something's not right, or I'm not in the right working environments or around the right integrity. And so I packed all my stuff and moved to California actually when I was just turning 30. I sold everything and did the 2 suitcases move across the country and started over. And I thought, oh, all my problems would be solved. It was just the government was the problem. And then
Oh, wow.
one of my first clients was PG&E actually in San Francisco. And it was, yeah, very similar experiences that I experienced in the government of just not feeling that I was using my soul for what it was here to do. And it was years after that I landed in big pharma was my last client experience. And I think that was around 2020 was the biggest time that as an internal coach, people were coming to me sharing with what they were experiencing in the marketing and sales of pharmaceuticals. And that to me was my like final straw of my values being out of alignment, and just having to take the leap of faith, and also being very supported in
Yeah.
my exit strategy, if you will, with a higher power, which has really supported my faith journey, which you really don't get faith unless you take action.
Yeah, faith without works, or the action part. There's the thought, and then there's the steps. And I love that you made a shift, or started that shift and seeking. And I love the days when you could pack everything up in 2 suitcases. That's not the case for me today. Um, yeah, those good, or in your car. But I love that you described it was just these little shifts, right, leading up to where you are now. And I can totally relate to the pandemic in itself causing that, because we're in our homes, we have a lot of time to ourselves, that internal like time or reflection, right? And being removed from things in a way. And you noted really grappling with the golden handcuffs and seeking to create an abundant lifestyle that resonated with your values. You kind of touched on them a little bit, but what would you say were some of the values that you wanted to align with that maybe you weren't finding, in your corporate work?
Yeah, I think really getting in my truth, and I was seeing, candidly speaking, I think management consultant, it's no maybe no surprise that we can take information and turn it into a story, right? And it's a lot of times for example, the finance team wasn't staying late because they didn't have the numbers. They were staying late because they were trying to make the numbers make sense for the investors. And so that to me was just starting to feel, yeah, a little, it was interesting. It was like it didn't feel an integrity, but everybody was kind of signed on to the unsaid nothing's
Mm,
wrong here. And it's
mm,
even interesting looking at how we often choose work environments that mirror our upbringing, right? And
love
um,
that.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that nothing's being said here. I love my family, love my parents, but there was not a lot being said. And so I always, I, I don't know, felt I needed to take a role of communicator, mediator, something to what's that, those feelings like you described inside. What do I do with those? That's been a long journey to figure that out, but could totally relate to that. How was immersing yourself in feng shui? When did that come about to start to kind of also transform your circumstances?
yeah, it's interesting. Even going, that's such a great segue because it's going back to where I think we're all kind of returning to our essence. I think especially during this time, I think there's a great like professional reshuffle, and I think midlife gives you that opportunity too to really get honest of like, gosh, am I going to keep going on this path or take the hard call of being done? And I can remember growing up that my room was my safe space. And actually, I reinvented myself. I could remember very clearly I was in this pink room for like elementary, I think to middle school. And then when I had a half brother, I still do, and he was moving to college because he was so much older than me. And I got to take over his room. And his room was like this big room at the end of the house that had its own staircase. It was like kind of like the playroom, if you will. And I just decided I was moving out of that pink room and I was going to move into my brother's room. And at that time, I was getting made fun of for my weight. They would call me
Mm,
Shamu when I got on the bus. And it was just, I was really struggling with getting made fun of. And while like simultaneously standing up for the people that were getting made fun of, but I couldn't seem to stand up for myself. And
oh,
just
yeah.
being able to reinvent myself by moving into my brother's room and almost deciding, like the universe works with a decided mind, like really declaring things are different now. And I didn't lose any weight, but I showed up with a different energy, which changed my
Mm,
circumstances. And so when I started learning about feng shui, I was realizing my sensitivities as a gift and not a problem, like it seemed to be in corporate, was more of a way for me to lean into my innate brilliance and what I'm born with, and maybe what I've always been unconsciously doing is really, really using my environment as a tool. And especially in the health and wellness spaces, I think we talk so much about biohacking, but we don't ever talk about biohacking our space and
mm,
how our space really is one of the biggest tools that we have.
right.
And feng shui specifically, they say the home is a physical body that holds your body. And so
Mm,
even thinking of the health of the body that's holding your body is,
mm.
I think, something that we can all use more of. You know, if we go work out every day or brush our teeth every day, how are we tending to our energetic hygiene of the spaces that we spend so much time in and may not be as aware of how impactful it really is?
Yeah, I love that. And just, well, like, I mean, and again, if anyone works from home or went through the quarantine period, just before that and after, we spend a lot of time in our homes. And like you mentioned from the childhood, I love that the different rooms and how you shared that, how within your environment, there's environments that could even, a room, a different space within that that can change how you show up, how you felt. I mean, that's a really cool thing, and it is tied to who we are. And I know it's a common thought that many people think of feng shui as a little woo woo or question if it really works. So I'm sure I'm not the first person to bring that up. When you help people align their inner world with their outer world, what does that actually look like in real life? Maybe some people who are not really tapped in or never explored what feng shui is.
Yeah, thank you for naming that. First of all, I think you can throw feng shui out the window, and maybe if you're more aligned with science, you can start to understand that your space is a mirror of your unconscious. Like something as simple as your sock drawer or how many bags you hold on to. This is all a perfect, especially us as coaches, what I notice coaching in corporate spaces, which I also got called woo woo by my HRBP after they hired me and gave me a fabulous signing bonus. I was like, well, why did you hire me if I was woo woo? And I started even reflecting on that word of woo woo might very well be a derogatory term for power. And, feng shui is 4,000 years old and was developed when we were living off the land. The feng shui grandmasters were shamans and they understood how energy was supporting the community and how it was moving or it was not moving on the land that we once lived off of. And so I just want to invite or reclaim that let it be woo woo because it's ancient and perhaps we've just been colonized or taken out of the power of this wisdom and getting to return back to it in a form of reverence, even just honoring Mother Earth and honoring that in feng shui when the five elements are in harmony and balance in the physical space. That's when you walk into a space and you just take a deep breath and your nervous system drops because it feels the coherence of harmony. And I think we've really, as a society, have fallen out of that coherence of harmony. So something like this may very well sound woo-woo. And I think it's such an opportunity for us to come back to our roots and come back into the DNA that we all have. All of our ancestors lived off the land. And whether you're from my lineage and working with pagans or you're from India and Vatsu, every culture also has their own version of feng shui. And it's really a form of, coming back home to what I think we've always known.
I love that. That just gives me such a different, even expands what before connecting with you today about what the word outside of just our home, but our home as a origin story and where we've come from, because we live in a very modern technological world, and that's going at a rapid pace. And that my thing was just let a little bit of woo woo in your life. No harm. No, I don't think any harm's going to come. Let it in. Let it in. I love that.
Yes.
And then some people think, feng shui, but you gave just this rich explanation because I think some people think, like myself, it could be, which it involves is moving furniture around in a room. And, for you personally, did moving your own stuff around pull you more into this work? Was it working with others where you just started to see how, because I know you focused a lot on coaching, transformational coaching, and then just how did your own story or others, the work, just pull you into utilizing it as a big part of what you do?
Yeah. I know those I've been sent many memes of like, if something's wrong, just blame the furniture. Like, and I think it's really important as, a white woman that has studied with several teachers for feng shui, and even the awareness that there are many lineages and schools of feng shui. There's like Tibetan Buddhism, there's Black Hat, there's Compass School, there's Flying School. And I personally really did a deep dive with the 8 mansions. But before all that, because I got kind of curious, I think I first learned about feng shui. I grew up watching Oprah. Oprah raised me. And I remember The Secret was on Oprah, and even my friends used to make fun of me. I think I bought everyone a copy of The Secret when we were graduating from college. And I was subscribed to really the power of our thoughts and being able to not, manifest a Lamborghini because we just believe that we're going to get a Lamborghini, but to be able to hold the identity of the worth of someone who owns a Lamborghini. And just like I did coming out of middle school, just start to move different, start to think different and take different actions. And like I shared earlier, I don't think I was a brilliant management consultant, but I think what made me really good is that I noticed sitting at these conference tables, like even in the Department of Defense, I have this specific memory of how the energy was moving in the room. And obviously the person, the general, whoever it was sitting up top. And I just noticed little things, little subtleties, like he had a Mickey Mouse watch on. And to me, I was like, someone with so much power has a Mickey Mouse watch, and no judgment. It was just he had so much command and power, and then wearing a Mickey Mouse watch with so much innocence and like young child. And it really just allowed me to see how we start to feel and power based on what's being mirrored back to us. Like that person was being mirrored back all their power by the way the energy in the room was treating them, and then how I was noticing also in the physical space. And so I would always try to sit myself, some very common feng shui that maybe people are familiar with is always being in the power position or in the command position, which is being able to see the door and things in front of you coming at you. So ideally you would have like your back, right, protected, almost like if you were in the mafia back in the day. Like,
Right.
you don't
Yes.
be
You got to
surprised.
not have your back to the door. I am half Italian, so I know the
Okay,
meaning of that.
you already know. So we're all, yeah, it's in your DNA too.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, and then when you work with clients, because I think you mentioned I don't, you may do some virtual or in person. I was just thinking, you know, when you come to someone's home, like walking a house room by room, and what, how do you discover how each space mirrors their nervous system? Kind of tying it, because I know we're talking about, you know, getting to that of how an environment, a space, um, you know, connects to the nervous system, whether you need to be more calm, whether you need to be, you know, whether it's more in command of work, family. Yeah, what does that look like? You know, just an example.
Yeah. I think it's several things happening at once. If you, I'm sure everyone can kind of relate to how they feel when they walk into a new space, and whether they feel comfortable and want to stay a while, or even like the subtleties of like maybe being okay in there but not quite relaxed. And so I I help people in several ways. I help people also maybe what I was sharing earlier, when we're stuck in our stories of what's possible or what has been, or we could never do that because of this. It's like being
Mm,
able to see it in the space, and by it I mean um, almost like an example or like a subliminal message. For example, if like the example I gave earlier around bags, of having so many bags, it's like kind of wondering like, do is there a reason that we're holding on to all of that, right? And if there's
mm,
anything in disarray, especially in the eight mansions with your personal energy directions, just being able to stay with that long enough, like Gestalt psychology offers, to be with it long enough that it starts to take a new shape. And so we start to
mm,
move the energy, which is also moving that belief. And so that's how I really work with people, to help them see the way their space is set up could be a mirror to their life, and being able to do a proper intake of what's happening in the life, and then be able to show where it is in the space, or at least
mm.
just get curious if
Yeah.
it resonates, because it's like somebody's space is like somebody's body. It's very intimate, um, and feng shui isn't Marie Kondo. Like it's not all about clutter. It is though about harmony, and being able to see even as simple as the masculine and the feminine, of like how balanced it is based on circles and squares. And it's like putting on a pair of glasses where you just start to see the way the energy
Mm,
moves in the home. And
yeah.
it's basically traditional Chinese medicine acupuncture for the physical space. So where there's blockages of the chi, the life force moving through the space, it's just an opportunity for us to put a needle in it, or put a remedy, or move something to see if that doesn't then shift the identity. And
Yeah.
really, yeah.
No, I love that, because some people may not, my first thought is some people may not be comfortable with dealing with themselves as a space and things, thoughts or feelings. But it's nice to have like a physical thing to go to, a physical form, and like you said, helping someone see something of how it impacts them or why they may have that there and what story are they holding on to, among other things. And then I know that there are, that goes to more of those that hold on to things for a very long time and are not yet ready, and walking through, just someone even coming into their space is a big, huge part for them, because I definitely have had, hoarding type tendencies in some of my family or friends. And so, just getting there is a big deal. But when someone's ready and open and willing, and I love that you said it's just creating how their home is this, nervous system or tied to their nervous system to support them. And I think when someone is in a receiving mode or open, they can start to go, oh, maybe I do want more supportive things in my life, in my own space, in myself, in the relationships that I have. So some women, like you said, when you come into someone's home, you can feel a calmness, and then there's times you go into a home or a space, and I know personally I experience this where it drains me. And what's actually happening, like energetically or psychologically, in those moments?
It's usually that it's not contained. And by containment, I mean where there's containment in feng shui there or any energy work, there's magnetism, right? And when you go into a space, I mean, it goes back to the wisdom of living off the land. Like you can almost think of it as if there was a flood to come in of like 2 to 3 inches. If the water can come in and leave and not destroy anything, that's usually a good sign that the chi is also able to come in and leave. And so I think you start to notice, like when things are on the floor, when things are maybe not in a, so much of feng shui was kept for the elite as well. And I love it because I think what it does is it really raises our awareness. And as our awareness rises, our consciousness rises and our circumstances start to change. And it's very, very powerful to start to bring in the dignity that like royalty would have. And like feng shui 101, like no shoes by the door. Your front door is like your mouth. So you want to treat it like flossing every day, keeping that area clean. But it's also really starting to think of your space like a castle, regardless of your circumstances, so that we start taking on a little more of that identity of royalty that we all are. And getting to
Love that.
reclaim that. I feel like there's been many times in my life where I didn't have dignity mirrored back to me, certainly not at work, sometimes romantically, relationships. The only place I was finding my dignity was deciding to create it in my space. And I too have hoarding in my family, and I feel like it's ancestral healing to step out of that fear of holding on and being able to meet it with love. And yeah, and
Love that.
yeah.
I love that. Do you have maybe an example of when you walk into a person's space or virtually that you can tell? I mean, you mentioned the bags. Are there some other, like, because we talked about also the hoarding aspect, but some telltale signs that someone is really struggling to go through things emotionally?
Yeah, I think there's a key, kind of like going back to acupuncture and the home being a body. I think there's key like places of stagnation. Usually the kitchen is very telling for health. The office or any workspace or lack of workspace is usually a telltale for boundaries within work. The bedroom is always, I've walked in many bedrooms, one that was moving through a divorce. This work is really helpful with reinvention and life transitions. And I noticed one bedside table was really big and one was really small. And one's covered in things and one has nothing, and it shows an imbalance in the relationship. Also, art is very back to, again, if you don't resonate with feng shui, it's your subconscious programming. You want to think of your space as a 3D vision board. Like it is Times Square, like subliminal messages all day long, whether you realize it or not. And so
Yeah.
it's really like taking command of your marketing department of like what
Your
do you
social
want?
media, what are you scrolling? What's in front of you? That's what, yeah, subliminal
Yeah. And what's
messages.
actually here? Like, oh, I noticed this bedside table is bigger. And I also am noticing in the conversation, this same person that sleeps on that side of the bed is taking up way more of the conversation. And so it's a truth teller. It's just a mirror for the truth.
I love that, a mirror for the truth. And you do, not to distance from, you do have the transformational coaching, intuitive healing modalities like somatic movement and breath work. And maybe just touch on a little bit of those, of how you feel those have also helped, because I know we spent a good amount on the feng shui aspect, but maybe in relation to the nervous system, just that could just be even prepping people, right, to get calm that down.
Absolutely. I mean, I personally believe that the chi is what we breathe, right? So the breath of taking a deep breath in and a longer breath out is just in itself like a great way to start to see how all of these things are actually the same thing, just showing themselves in different ways. So I offer breath work and I offer, a lot of times the somatic is when we're not ready to get in our bodies, getting in our space may be the next the next right step, right? Or vice versa. Maybe we've gotten our bodies and we're fully taking up all the rooms. That's another feng shui best practice. But we haven't been able to step into our space, right? And so I think all of this is kind of embodiment work in a way, but it's using the same tools as the life force that flows through your home or flows through your body, which I believe personally is spirit, and
Mm,
it's a very, very intelligent and coherent force. And so when there's expansion, it's like creating heaven on earth and it can move. And when there's stagnation and heaviness and fear and doubt and all the things, it kind of feels like hell. And I
yeah.
think it's just helping people let it move. So my
Mm,
background being in corporate like leadership development, I offer coaching even outside of the space because I think there's many doorways and we're all going to the same place. And so I offer those doorways.
yeah, I love that, because some people, may not resonate with feng shui and think that's not the door I want to come in through. I know I've had such little baby steps of my own healing journey with little pieces of different things and healers or practitioners or coaches that I've gone to. And I really love what you shared, especially in midlife, is just taking up space. I think as a woman, um, but this could be for anyone. Just if our lives have had us in a way to play small, it's very uncomfortable or unknown territory. Like just even how you described the couple with the bedside tables. My thoughts are, well, did the one person think they had tons of space to operate in, and the other person did not? But just for me coming into midlife, I am learning how to, but at first I had to come to a place to be comfortable with receiving, to take up space. And then what does that look like? So I love how you shared all of the other ways that you help people heal and just get comfortable with themselves and their spaces. For someone that's listening and light bulbs or little feels are coming up for them of where to start creating more calm in their home today, what would maybe be a place that they could begin for themselves?
Yeah, I think the most powerful tool is just noticing. Like, even if you were to walk in your space with fresh eyes of if you can possibly just have this almost like acute curiosity of like, huh, why do I keep the knives on the counter, which is like another feng shui, or
Uh-oh. I gotta check my.
but like I think curiosity is if you were to walk through, like starting with your front door and even noticing if you don't use your front door, like are you feeling like royalty always using the side door? I mean, servants technically use side doors. And so it's just using like a level of curiosity that maybe you start to just get curious. Feng Shui, the meaning is wind and water. And so I always remind people, first of all, there's no perfect feng shui. And second of all, to move with the elements, move like wind and water would move. It doesn't need to be a hurricane of like, I gotta move all the furniture. And that's actually not what it is. It's really understanding really the life of the home, the astrology of the home, and also your astrology. And I use your birthday to look up your personal energy directions. So if people are curious, I always invite them to start there too, because it's 4 directions for your success, for your wisdom, for your health, and for your relationships. Very similar to the Wheel of Life, which, funny enough, in Feng Shui, the Baga map is a very common, more Western Feng Shui of laying a map over the house, but it quite literally is the Wheel of Life. And even getting curious of where you are in the Wheel of Life, if you're not familiar, is just kind of a measure of like, how
Yeah.
successful do I feel? How are my relationships? And where is my health? And kind of just the idea is to have it as a wheel so it can move and not have one thing really high, one thing really low. And so just starting to look in those directions to have more of a relationship and come in contact with what might really be there versus what we just maybe feel like isn't right, but we can't quite change or put our finger
Mm.
on.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I think that's a really good place to start. And then maybe just like very common, like feng shui best practices, I think are another just easy place to start and to not take it all on at once because it can be overwhelming. I always tell people to make it, I would never want to like, I don't feng shui and done. Like, if anything, I teach feng shui as a way for you to have your own personal practice. I think you should
Mm.
work with your energy every day. And
Mm.
um, yeah,
Kind of
home.
like breath work. I mean, if you teach someone breath work, you hope it's not a one and done or meditation and that makes sense. I may not have thought about that but as a tool for them to use in their everyday life, as a tool to go to when something feels off. I have so many things coming up for me right now about my space. You talked about the bags and the shoes by the front door, which I take my dog out, and I do leave through the garage versus the front door due to proximity of my car, but I definitely like to keep a crown on sometimes. So if I want to feel like royalty versus the servant of leaving the back, yeah, just lots coming up for me, and that's fun because I think you said just to stay curious and aware, and it's a new way of looking at ourselves and our space. Is there any one place in the house that tends to have the greater impact towards emotional well-being, or is it really balanced across all?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And even before I answer, I just want to like validate what you said is that's completely normal and we don't have servant I don't personally have
I don't
servants,
either. I do not.
nor do I necessarily want them. I think it's empowering to know what role you're playing in your own life. Like I pick up my shoes when I walk my dog, and sometimes they sit there, and it goes back to like there's no perfect feng shui, but if they're sitting there for days, kind of like having something in your teeth, like
Mm,
we all get something in our teeth, but if you keep it there for days, like it's stagnation that is causing disease in your
out
home.
with that. Don't want that.
Don't want
Okay.
that. And also the way homes are set up, it's very convenient just to go through the garage. And so, of course, if you just come back from Costco, by all means, like do what you got to do. There's no wrong. But like when you are feeling like you want to feel your dignity, your royalty, to walk into the front door as like a tool of how you
Yeah.
like, yeah. So,
I want to
um,
feel it definitely empowered is my one of my favorite words in midlife, and tapping into how I can expand on that versus things that make me feel smaller in a sense. So it just feels like a breath of fresh air talking to you today and getting to learn, like again, expand my awareness. And I definitely can, hope the listeners get some of that as well. Like I, like you, am um, I don't know, I used to use the word hypersensitive to things, but just speaking with you, like I can definitely feel things coming up in my body just by talking about it. So it definitely works as far as tapping into one's energy, right? Just we're not even doing anything and we're just talking about it. So, and I do love that you note, I believe when we shift our energy, we shift our lives. And I know when I move just a few things around in my house, which I do love on occasion, because it's kind of almost connecting to any growth that I've had or just like growth that I want to have coming up. And sometimes I'll shift a few things that, like you said, to just feel different energy in my space. You entering into midlife, what do you think about midlife being a powerful time to redesign or refresh our environments?
yeah. I remember when I gotta be honest, when I turned 40, I was like, am I really 40? How did this happen? It kind of happened fast. And um, I remember hearing, I can't remember which culture, but in some cultures, you can't even start leading circles. Like I believe we met with breath work.
Yes.
I was leading breath work, and in some cultures, you can't even lead a circle unless you are above 40. Like it's like a you, and I think that's just so empowering to remember of. And I can see why, like, to really have the life experience and the wisdom that comes with time and in your practice, right? I feel like nothing is more important than personally my practices. I think all of our practices, because I think they're our real way home. And when we come home, I feel like that's when we are fulfilled. And kind of even with what you're saying about the energy transference and what happens in the space, back to the dignity of getting the muscle memory of really like saying like this no longer works for me and I'm going to take it out my space, is the same muscle that allows us to say this relationship or this job or this just isn't working and I'm going to take it to the goodwill. And on that drive to goodwill, I may be wondering, should I really take it? Should I let it go? And like, it's nothing like walking away from the goodwill with the QR code in hand of like, no, I've decided. And I think that kind of goes back to
Mm.
midlife and our lives being precious. Like I've started by losing my dad and turning 40. I feel like it was the biggest like heart opener or spiritual awakening in a way. I mean, I think we go through many levels of like dark nights and more deeper awakenings.
Yes.
And I feel like for me, just like the preciousness of life, of even thinking about midlife, yeah, and that way of like we don't actually know how long we're here. So while we're here, even more reason to clean up in a
Yeah.
way of like what's not working and know that it is so worth it on the other side.
Well, and I do love that you say clean up, but it is also, I think, as we've talked about, just which I feel we live in a very distracted, there's so many things coming at us. It's just also a way to connect with ourselves, which I know in midlife many women talk about kind of that coming home, reconnecting to themselves. And so something like this can really help transition through menopause, divorce, empty nesting, just someone wanting that reinvention, through, again, that's why I love having someone like you on here to show women, A, that they don't have to do it alone, too, we live in a world, there's so much support and different ways, whatever resonates with you, to choose and just to hold the hand of someone who has walked before you, has healed before you, and just makes you feel comfortable and not alone. And yeah, this is just, goodness gracious. Yeah. I think in midlife, so many things like, and you shared the loss of your father, which a loss of anyone is this big space that either opens up or empties, and what to do with that space. So many things.
And how our space is really a time capsule, right? And at certain points, there's thresholds where I think we can start to take inventory of what's in this time capsule. And is it anchored us in our past beliefs and our past values even? And when we do go through loss or grief, which is transformational in itself, like you can't go through an empty nesting or any kind of life event, which I think is so specific to midlife for the people listening, is then like really thinking how their space can then support them with the chapter they're moving into, like quite literally, you know, taking from the quantum into the 3D of where we're going, not necessarily where we've been, and in that stagnation of the past.
Yeah, for your environment to support all the shifts that you're going through. Now, I know you're newly entering midlife, so I don't know if, but you gave so many examples to this question about already consciously retiring certain things as you approach here. Is there any one thing that you feel that you've retired, kind of turning 40, entering in? Is there something coming up with for you lately about what you're letting go of?
Yeah, I think so. You're asking for me personally, what have I, like, how
Yeah.
have I worked in my space?
Yeah, or just what, I don't know, this week, this year, last year, if there's anything that has come up that you're like, oh, I've let that go, or I'm in the process of letting this go.
Yeah, I've been reflecting on, um, first of all, like anything that's like broken is like that's been a consistent one. And if it's not fixed, then immediately it has to go. But, you know, Julia Cameron and the Artist Way, I also lead Artist Way groups, and she talks so much about the environment actually. And it's a perfect, they just so happen to rhyme, Artist Way and Feng Shui, but they go really well together. And actually, the morning pages was my real, I think, muscle memory to get out of corporate. And it also has been my deepening of my intuition, because I think when you really start working with the energy of your space and understanding how the energy is supporting or not supporting who you're becoming, I think there's also just like a deeper reverence. And so she mentions low worth clothing, and I catch myself, yeah, and
I love
especially being
that.
more sensitive to fabrics and the quality of the fabric, and moving out of my, I guess I don't want to name drop, but like fashion era, and moving into my quality, it's worth investing in, and
Oh,
also the frequency of natural fabrics versus how I feel in fabrics that are not. And so I'm in the process of no longer buying things that are cheap and letting that be
throw
reinforced.
away clothes.
Yeah, and you
Wow.
know, and like not that I'm, you know, just maxing out my credit card in any way, but just slowly taking inventory and creating more awareness
Yeah.
of my fabrics.
And I was just sharing with a friend, I think yesterday, because I have done a little cleanse on I think it was actually my mom. I have done a little cleanse on my closet, but in reality, I had a stint where I did backpacking, lived out of a backpack for 6 months. I wore, what, I had probably 5 things, 10 things at the max. And if I go in my closet, I know there's just 10 maybe go-to outfits, the rest. So it is, yeah, just, I mean, again, so much is, I'm going to need a journal or do something when I get off of this podcast. so many things are coming to my mind, but as I hope for the listeners as well, of just, and it gives me that sense of like, oh wow, like I don't want to use the word control, but I have a choice in so many things that are happening in my life, in my space. And sometimes I think that I know I can forget and think it's everything in the outside world that's affecting me. But I have such choice and reverence over what is in my world and space. And you shared that so much today. So I love that you note everything we want is waiting on the other side of the courage to shift our energy. And when you see your surroundings differently, you see yourself differently, and you move through the world with renewed purpose and confidence. So I love that. Couldn't have said it better. And it really sums up our time together today. And I'm just going to go through a couple last minute pop up questions to see what comes to mind. So, what would you want every woman in midlife to understand about the relationship between her nervous system and space she lives in?
Hmm. The first half of that question, the first thing that came to mind was just how powerful we are, and to know that your space is like a moving meditation, that we can be reminded of that power every day by moving with it, by directing it, even as like the witches used to sweep their porches every day. Like there's so much power and commanding a space. And I feel like as women, I think we're just so innately wired
Mm,
to fully own that power.
I love that. What does regulated mean to you now compared to before you started your own personal transformation?
Yeah. I think regulated to me means kind. I think there's like a
Mm,
calm certainty with regulation. And, obviously the breath has a lot to do with that. And I noticed I couldn't force my breath. I had to be kind, and I had
mhm,
to relax into the chicken with my head cut off that was positively reinforced most of my life. And I think using tools long enough that we see that they're really supporting our kindness to ourselves, and yeah, having that calm certainty be almost the calm as the feminine and the certainty as the masculine, and really having that sacred union of both within ourselves, I believe
mm.
creates that regulation.
I love that. Beautiful. How do you feel more powerful and equipped for entering midlife, learning what you've learned, and taking a leap to transform parts of your life?
Yeah, I think death is one of the greatest teachers. And
Mm,
I think to really be, whenever I'm meeting an edge of being more visible, is definitely an edge for me, which is why I've been in the artist way and sharing my work more. It's such an opportunity of like, oh, we're all just gonna, I think we just had Ash Wednesday, right? Like we will just return to ashes. And I I think that's just a really great reminder of let's do what our younger selves may not have thought we could do, and make our 90-year-old self really, really proud.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story and wisdom with us. And this conversation is such a powerful reminder that the spaces we live in are not just where life happens, they are quiet partners in how we heal, how we feel, and how safe our nervous systems are allowed to be. And so when we begin to design our environments with intention, we often discover we're really redesigning the way we experience ourselves and our lives. And you can find Elizabeth and her offerings at www.elizabetharmstead, and that's Elizabeth traditionally how it's spelled, and Armstead Is it ARMS?
It's ARM as in Mary, ISTEAD.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. It is an I, yes, in there. So, and your Instagram profile, Holistic Life Coach, is simply the handle is I am Elizabeth Armstead. And she has a signature coaching process called The Return. And you talked about the Artist Way Circle. Anything you want to share with our listeners of how to connect with you or how to reach out?
Yeah, any of those ways is a great way to reach out. I teach classes around LA as well, and yeah, I feel like I felt called earlier when you were closing us of just how this is truly the serenity prayer, right? Of God really grant us the serenity to accept the things
Mm,
we cannot change and really the courage to change the things we
mm,
can. And I feel like the wisdom of knowing the difference is maybe just choosing, yeah, that grace of
yeah.
making
Help.
one small change.
Yeah, I love that. So beautiful. Thank you again today. So, everyone, please take the opportunity to check her out either on Instagram, her beautiful website. When you design your space with intention, you give your nervous system somewhere safe to land. Change the energy of your space, and you often change the energy of your life. If this episode opened your eyes to connection between your inner world and the spaces around you, please be sure to like, subscribe, or follow so you don't miss what's next. New episodes of Men, Menopause, and Miracles drop every Monday, and you can also watch these conversations on YouTube. Also, if someone in your life has been craving more calm, clarity, or simply a space that feels better to live in, share this episode with them. Sometimes the smallest shifts in our environment can create the biggest shifts in how we feel. And sometimes the right conversation arrives exactly when someone needs it the most. And I am Suzanne, your host and your midlife wingwoman. This is Men, Menopause, and Miracles. Midlife isn't just about changing your body or routines. Sometimes it's about changing the space around you so the woman you're becoming finally has room to breathe. I'll see you next Monday. Until then, bye for now.